I feel like the relic grind always goes one of two ways. It's always like when it's a big pain in the ass, everyone complains about how awful it is, and then when it's really easy, everyone complains about how easy it is. So the developers are probably just bashing their head into the wall, wondering what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So nobody complains about it. Of course, most of the veteran players are on the side like, man, relic grinds always suck. What are you talking about?
Greetings, travelers, and welcome to Chocobo Radio, episode number 17. Today, we have a legendary YouTuber on the show, Misshapen Chair. How are you doing today, Mr. Chair?
Jeez, you're gonna gas me up like this. I'm doing very normal on this fine Sunday. Thanks for asking.
Well, that's good to hear. He's a YouTuber with over 90,000 subscribers on YouTube and over 6,000 followers on Twitch. Misshapen Chair, welcome to the show. I am so happy that you're here. You are one of my favorite YouTubers of all time, and I am lucky that you decided to come onto the show. So thank you.
Oh, yes. I mean, the pleasure's mine. I don't get invited to these things very often, so it was a pleasant surprise.
So I think where I wanted to start today is just by going over the news of 14. So we finally get the patch 6.5 website, and we also have the title Growing Light. I wanted to ask you, because this has been a question that I've been asking pretty much everybody that's come onto the show, and I've been asking myself this, but do you, Misshapen Chair, think that Zero will be making it to 7.0? What do you think?
Zero? Let me think.
Yeah.
She'll probably live and then decide to stay in the 13th, and then we'll never see her again. There you go. That sounds pretty standard for 14 plot at this point.
Well, you know, it's been interesting, and I think the fact that she was pretty prominent on this on the art that came out for 6.5, it gives me hope. But I think you have the correct take here, which is you know, she's gonna come and she's gonna go, and then we're probably never gonna hear from her again. But I guess only time will tell. 6.5 will be launching in early October, whatever early means to the developers, and we're gonna get part 1 of 2 of the MSQ. So I know I'm excited. I know a lot of people are excited, but I think the thing that most people will be excited for is the 3rd Alliance raid for the 24-man raids. Have you been enjoying your time with those two that's come out so far?
The 24-mans have been kind of fun this expansion. I guess it's a bit tough in some ways to compare it to some of the stuff that we had before it. Maybe it's a bit unfair. It's fair. Like I'm a huge fan of Nier, so honestly those raids could have been really boring and I'd still have a blast. Yeah. I think the Evil East raids are also really fun. I'm a big fan of those. And even stuff like back in Heaven's Ward, those are pretty fun too. So it's like, coming off of all of that, I think it's a bit unfair to say like, yeah, I probably don't like them as much as some of those, but like, you know, it's kind of hard to compare. So I had a lot of fun running them like the first time, like I usually do when I'm blinded by all my effects and I have no idea what's going on. But like, you know, as usual, once you have it on grind, it's kind of like, yeah, well, it's like, yeah, you're just doing it.
Right. Okay. We're also getting new variant and criterion dungeons, which, you know, I know there's a lot of takes going around with those. I just think they need to rethink the rewards that are dropped from those variant raids, but it is what it is. We're also getting
classic, right? You know, it's like, it's always tough. I don't know why they let people just buy all the rewards from them instead of doing it, but here we are. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like, don't get me wrong, I would love to do them more often. I would love to grind them out, but Man, I don't know what they can do to change. Maybe up the gear eye level that drops there, or just put in some older glam or something. But I know that's one of the content that a lot of people that I talk to that I know just don't run them because they have no reason to.
Yeah, it's like a lot of people don't run it because they don't have reasons, and then it's like a classic little negative feedback loop because the people who do want to run it can't even find people who want to do it. So
Right.
it just ends up being kind of weirdly dead on arrival. I don't think the instances themselves are actually bad though. They just need some slightly better implementation around it.
Yeah, and I think I've been hearing that, like I've been reading a lot of comments about that where a lot of people are saying that they should just go back and start adding new rewards to older content. That way more people have a reason to go back and do them.
I'll say something crazy here.
Here we go. Hot take number one.
Yeah, there used to be a way they did this. It was called the relic weapon.
Oh my gosh.
That would force you to grind a bunch of old content in the game. But so it's like it's not even. You don't even have to. I mean, it's not even new, right? You're like, that's what I was expecting them to do when the Criterion dungeons come out. I'm like, oh, they're gonna make me grind it like 20 times for the relic or something. No, that didn't happen. So. Yeah, that's nice.
that is a whole conversation about that, and did you end up making a video on that on the entire Endwalker relics and how it differs from everything else that they've done before?
Nah, I didn't talk about that. It's like, I just know, like, I've been like loosely following it, and I'm just like doing my relic steps on occasion. I'm like, and the only reason I'm even grinding it out is because I'm like, oh, it's BIS for ultimate, so I gotta go grind out my relic. And I go get it, and I'm like, that's it? Okay. That's the easiest relic I've ever gotten in this game.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
It's interesting that they do that. I do wonder if they're gonna keep that up for 7.0, given the negative feedback that I hear all the time on Reddit, especially. It's like Reddit did not like this relic weapon grind this time around. But
well, I feel like the relic grind always goes one of two ways. It's always like when it's a big pain in the ass, everyone complains about how awful it is, and then when it's really easy, everyone complains about how easy it is. So the developers are probably just bashing their head into the wall wondering what they're supposed to do, so nobody complains about it. Of course, most of the veteran players are on the side like, man, relic grinds always suck, what are you talking about?
True. Yeah, that's true.
Like, but oh well, that's how it goes.
Yeah, we're also getting the expansion of the free trial up till Stormblood, so I feel like we're gonna have a lot of new players into the game, especially coming into the free trial. So I think I'm really excited. I'm really excited for that. In other news, we had Amanda Akin. She started streaming Final Fantasy XIV on Twitch, which, I was a little hesitant. I was a little worried because, every time there is someone popular that decides to stream 14, I think Asmongold was like the last big example, how the community tends to, they get a little overexcited, when people start playing this game. And, I was a little worried for her, but I jumped into the chat, I jumped into the stream for a little while, and it seemed like everyone was pretty nice. They were doing a good job. They weren't being the common Final Fantasy XIV community that they tend to be, but it seems like she's having a good time on that, and I really hope that she makes it to the end, because I know that A Realm Reborn, I know how much of a grind and a slog that it can be, so I really hope that she makes it to the end.
It's the true bonding experience for most 14 players is the mutual suffering through A Realm Reborn. But it is not as painful to get through these days. They have made a lot of adjustments.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
But then again, I haven't done a fresh playthrough of A Realm Reborn in a long time, so I have no idea what it's like. And I don't have any plans to do that either.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, and then last but not least, we have a new misshapen chair video that went live today. How long did that video take, if you don't mind me asking?
That one? Not that long. It was like a few days or so. That's about it.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, not too exciting. That's probably the least amount of work I've put into a video in a long time. So.
Well, that's always good. It's always good to have more content, you know? It don't matter how long it takes.
Yeah, that's what people will tell me. But I don't know. I don't usually make too much stuff along those lines these days. I only did it mostly just to say a couple of things, and I was like, I can frame a whole video around this, and that was about it.
Gotcha.
But it's also just me being like, I need to take a break from some of these other dumb things I've done, so I'm like, maybe a little bit of a lighter project is a good idea.
Right. Okay. So I think that's actually a pretty good segue into the conversation, because, well, the first question that I always ask my guest is how did you get introduced into 14? So how did you start playing this game, and what made you stick with it?
Well, I have a very complicated history with this game, so I did play A Realm Reborn when it came out. I did not play 1.0. I only played A Realm Reborn when it was released. I got kind of sucked into the hype train only because I had a friend who was really excited about this, and back when it came out. So I tried it. At the time, I was playing on a very unstable internet connection, so I disconnected from the game every minute, which was really fun. And my playthrough died around the time that I unlocked Scholar in the game finally, back when you had the cross-class and everything else. And I was like, yeah, I did it. And then I just stopped playing the game. So that's my Realm Reborn experience. I did come back in Heaven's Ward for a bit to try to push through, and I didn't really do too much then. And then it was around the time that it was like me and my buddies wanted to try to keep in touch with each other, and we were trying to figure out something that we could all play together. And they were like, oh, we'll play Final Fantasy XIV again. And that was around pretty much not too long after Shadowbringers had really come out. And that's pretty much when I fully got invested in 14, was around that time. So, yeah, kind of how it goes. It's like,
right. And you know, we just talked a little bit about A Realm Reborn and how it can filter out a lot of people. So I think my question for you is, do you think we'll ever get to a point where the devs allow you to skip A Realm Reborn, Heaven's Ward, Stormblood, maybe even start you off in 7 or 8.0? Or do you think that is just going to ruin the experience, ruin the overall story, and should everybody be forced to play through A Realm Reborn? How do you see this conversation?
Well, it's kind of, it's really confusing, I guess. I mean, I think this mostly stems from just plenty of other games. I guess, actually, I don't know if I can really speak to it too much. I know World of Warcraft will let you skip through, like, everything, so they certainly don't care about it. Obviously, you can still buy a story skip if you really want to, so it's not like it's not an option to just bypass the whole game. And I guess I feel like if they're willing to sell the skip, they're probably okay with it, I would assume.
Yeah.
But it's also just kind of weird because, there's a lot of the stuff that people will mention about, like, setup in the plot line and stuff, or, like, getting introduced to the characters, and yet I feel like a lot of the development in A Realm Reborn is just completely irrelevant to pretty much every later expansion. And it's like, other than just knowing, like, that people exist, that's always what I feel like. I'm like, okay, I know that these factions exist, and I know who the Scions are, and, like, that's about it. And it's like, Shadowbringers is also a story that's very much was designed to be kind of siloed and very easy to experience without playing all the prior expansions and having all that knowledge. But you're like, okay, so maybe they want to do kind of more of that, but then, Endwalker comes out, which makes references to the whole game, so it's like, you kind of might not get necessarily the quote-unquote full experience out of that. But I don't know exactly what they'll have to do with it. I think their current system of just trying to rework A Realm Reborn into something that's a bit more modernized is probably okay. But at the same time, I'm a little sad about it because, you know, I feel like we're losing part of the 14 history. Like, watching people die in Orumvale is something that I take a lot of joy in, you know, and it's like I don't get to see people be like, what do you mean that this thing does this or whatever? Like, especially when they didn't have AoE markers for stuff. Be like, what? It's like, that's how this works. I'm like, yeah, man, it's great, isn't it? Don't you love Realm Reborn? Yeah. And it's like, obviously this all gets thrown away as soon as you get into the later expansions. You don't have anything like that. And it's like, you know, like I said, part of me as a complete sicko, I would really prefer some of this stupid stuff to stay in the game.
Right.
But I can see why they have iced it out a little bit. It's probably better overall for the new player experience. But at the same time, I'm like, man, everybody needs to experience what it's like to play A Realm Reborn on release with a 1 second of server lag built into the game, and you're playing like Dragoon against Titan, and he landslides, and you get like shot into the Nether Realm from like, you know, something that happened like 5 minutes ago. I think it's a very core memory that I have with this game.
Yeah.
It's like,
man.
so I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's just funny that I guess I can kind of think about it, because like to me, I probably wouldn't care if people would skip through some of this stuff, but I'd probably point at them and I'd say, but don't skip Shadowbringers though, because it's that one's at least worth your time, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if it were up to me, I think we should just make 7.0 the new like jumping off point. We already have A Realm Reborn through Endwalker, which is its own self-contained story. And I feel like they can just put that off in the back burner and just start fresh with 7.0. I get that people will be missing a lot of the context and a lot of the nuances from the characters, but if this game truly is going to last another 10 years, I just can't imagine that the devs want to force every single player to play through what 400 or 500 hours of MSQ content just to catch up to current raids and current MSQ. I don't know.
It's I do think there would be a bit of a problem at that point, right? You're very right when you say that, but also I just kind of feel like, well, maybe it could work. It all just depends how they want to write the story from there. It's like, as long as you don't need to know a bunch of stuff ahead of time to enjoy it, it'll kind of work. And I guess they kind of feel like the New Game Plus system of allowing people to go back and play old story content might be the way that, yeah, you could jump to the current expansion and play the stuff that everybody's excited about, but during some downtime you can go back and play the prior expansions if you want to know what that story is about. So maybe they're kind of building towards these systems. Maybe I'm giving them a lot of benefit of the doubt on that. But, you know, that'd be my positive interpretation on all of this, is like, okay, I can see why that they're doing all these things, and that it might be a good idea. Just because, yeah, playing catch up the entire time and then having your playthrough die before you even get to the current expansion is a bit sad.
Yeah.
It's like,
what sort of expectations do you have for 7.0? Like what do you want to see?
What do I want to see? Well, Jesus, I don't know about that. You know, it would be kind of a lot, I guess I would say, ignoring things like gameplay, I guess, because I could talk way too much about that. I think I'm kind of expecting the story to be a little bit of a step down from what we just had, which unfortunately is Dawntrail is going to have a rough time because it comes off the back of probably the most bombastic conclusion the story has.
Yeah.
So kind of whatever it does, it's going to be a little doomed, although I think people will probably have pretty low expectations. I shouldn't say super low expectations, lower expectations, because it can't possibly be that crazy just off the backs of what it did. Yeah. And that'll pretty much be it. I don't really know what they'll do with it. I hope it's just something kind of, maybe it'll be different, maybe it'll be more focused on just slice of life stuff. I think I'm gonna have a really hard time being invested in whatever stakes they try to set up, because I always just feel like at this point in the plot line, I don't really care who the villain is. There's no way they're gonna look me in the eye and tell me the Warrior of Light is not strong enough to fight whatever X villain is at this point. I'm like, there's just no way.
Yeah.
It's just really hard to say that. I'm like, not unless anything short of like the opening cutscene is us partying too hard that our Warrior of Light drank something suspicious that shrank their power down by like several thousand-fold. I'm like, you know, it just doesn't make sense at this point.
Yeah.
14 has tried several times to do some kind of like slice of life stuff, but I think it does always kind of fall back into the problem of just always needing a reason for why you have to do some kind of dungeon or story instance or whatever. So it's like, how are you going to fit that into a slice of life story? I'm like, are you opening up a restaurant and you need to go find the secret ingredient somewhere and that's why you have to go fight this big bad guy over here? It's like, I guess that could work, but it wouldn't be too different, I guess, from some other stuff. I mean, you know, even in like Heaven's Ward, you're just walking through an area and a random faction comes out and says like, oh, our god's being a dickhead, you have to go deal with him. And you're like, I don't think this was really relevant to the plot at the moment, but okay, I guess that's the excuse for why we have to do that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, they'll have a harder time doing these things where I'm like, that's why I'm like, I'm not sure if they'll be able to really try to pull it off. It'll either be, they'll either commit to it, and I feel like the instances will just be really jarring when they come out of nowhere, or they are gonna just have to set something up and just kind of roll with it. So,
yeah, I think I'm just a little tired of the whole end of the world, end of the universe storyline. That I just want something different. You know, it doesn't always have to be the end of the world.
You sure? I mean, come on. Everyone loves saving the world every 5 minutes, you know? It's like, you're really wondering about this universe and the stability if it's threatened every couple of months at this point. It's like, you're like, geez, man, I don't know. I'm like, maybe we could do something else for once.
Yeah. So, you know, back in 2021, you had an AMA video on YouTube where you talked about how healing can be boring if people are overgeared. And I'm just curious, do you still feel that way? Like, how do you think healing has changed or not changed since Endwalker's come out?
Man, did you kind of talk to me about healing? Well, as I am infamous for making a healing is boring video that, to the ire of some, I think healing in 14 has always kind of struggled with this really unfortunate reality that you're only ever going to play the job when you're playing something really hard and you actually have to plan out all your cooldowns. And when you're in something like a Savage tier or an ultimate fight where you have all this planning going on, then the jobs will feel pretty engaging because, you know, you have to actually use like all the buttons that they have at your disposal. And then you can go from that to playing the normal dungeon where, you know, I had this happen recently where a healer just dies by accident for whatever, and your tank just solo heals everybody with freaking Heart of Corundum for the entire fight, and you kill the boss, and all you're sitting here thinking is like, man, it must suck to be a healer in 14 to just know that you didn't even have to be here for that. Like, it's just really silly, but obviously it's a really tough call because it's like if you increase a bunch of the damage in those types of instances, it makes it really annoying for people who aren't particularly great at healer to actually have to, you know, play those instances. And so that's why they've kind of like been stuck in limbo for a long time. I feel like in the past, giving the healers at least a couple of more things to just kind of occupy their neurons in the middle of just hitting the boss 24/7 is just kind of better for that type of stuff, because it's like healing is weirdly more exciting the harder the game is, and it just gets worse the easier the content that you're running, to the point where you're just like falling asleep at the wheel, and then you forget that your dot even exists because you've mashed like 50 glares in a row because it's all you've had to do.
I really think that we need to have some sort of overhaul in the combat system in general. I feel like it's become a little stagnant with how healing works and how a lot of these boss fight works. I don't know exactly what they can do, but I feel like if they don't change something with like a dramatic overhaul, I feel like these problems are just gonna keep getting worse and worse, and it's just gonna snowball until, you know, everybody's angry.
Well, you know, it's really easy to be angry. I'm a great example of that, but it's also just like, I don't know if it necessarily needs like too much of an overhaul. I would say at this point, it's just the unwillingness to embrace the game for what it is. 14 at its core is a game that is pretty much always just about doing damage, as much as some people really don't like that.
Yeah.
But it's just like, you know, tanks have DPS rotations. You're like, the DPS obviously have DPS rotations. You're just thinking like, the fact that not even a single healer just has some basic DPS rotation just kind of feels like, so do you want them healing 24/7, or do you just accept the reality that healers are doing damage like 75% of the time, even in some of your hardest content that you have? It's like, that's kind of where I'm at on it, because it's like, you know, just, I'm not asking for the world over here. You know, you don't have to make something crazy, but I do think like just embracing it a little bit and just saying the only wiggle room they have in this game with creativity is unique ways to do damage. You can still do a lot with that if they just accept that that's the way the game is. But
yeah,
it's like, yeah, because, you know, it gets really tricky, because even for people who do run like a lot of this stuff, you know, the healing and the mitigation and all of that does just become part of your rotation for said encounter. You eventually just have it like all down to a specific like pattern that you're going to go through every time, unless your team overkills one of the ultimate bosses and then you don't have a cooldown and then you die to the next raid wide. But ignoring that, like, most people are like already pretty much out of rhythm with it at some point. So it's like, you know, and I don't think they could really ever make 14 a reactive game, because I just don't think it works super well. I won't be crazy to say that it's impossible, because anything is, but it would just require them to do a lot of extra work, I think, and I'm not sure if it would be super great by the end of all of that.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of other games throughout this content drought, or whatever you want to call it, and you know, even playing something like Baldur's Gate 3, I do wonder if the devs will ever embrace some more, you know, like, for example, having items that you can use in like during boss fights or during like dungeons or stuff, kind of like different scrolls or different just like items in general that,
oh yeah, you want to bring back duty actions?
Yeah. That'd be such an easy way to do it.
It's actually really funny that you even bring this up. I still think about when Omega Protocol came out, and I was just like, oh, I hope they give us the stupid lightning duty action again. That would be freaking great. You know? Yeah. I'm like, I always love it when this happens, and all the raiders get pissed off that they have to engage with this stupid mechanic. But it's like, you know, I actually do like those things, because I think they are just really funny. And it's like, you know, come on, just throw a couple of these stupid things in even there, because it's like, a lot of times I feel like there is that weird, like, there are these weird parts of the games like duty actions and stuff, but they never want to embrace that in the more hardcore content, because I think they rightfully assume that the more hardcore people will get upset. But you know, it would be more fun to me to just throw a couple of curveballs in every now and again.
Yeah,
like,
and I mean, you know what they could also do? They could just leave that for the overworld. Like that's one of the ideas that I've been having for a little while, which is making like an overhaul of how the game works in the overworld. You can keep dungeons and raids and trials, everything. You can keep that the same, but if they just started implementing a lot of different more mechanics, a lot of more interesting stuff to the overworld, because I feel like a lot of the overworld is fairly straightforward, boring even, because there's not a lot that goes into it, and a lot of the times the overworld is kind of just there to you know, set a location and to just give you quest markers. You don't really ever go out and explore or try to find, you know, like secret entrances or secret caves or you know, anything like that. I feel like if they were to overhaul the overworld, it'd make it a little bit more interesting.
You know, this sounds like a video that I just made recently. Well, I do kind of. I mean, yeah, the overworld is like it is silly for me to say stuff like this. It very much does just feel like create map, populate map with enemy and with quest marker and stuff like this, and it is pretty bland. But it's like, I think part of it is just because they've made everything a lot bigger in terms of the size of the maps, and so it's really hard to make it even kind of feel super lively at this point, just based on the fact that there's just so much space. But, you know, they kind of do a little bit of fun stuff with the overworld. It's like Blue Mage almost kind of feels like it was made for just cheesing overworld stuff. So, you know, they can kind of embrace it a little bit on that side, but it'll all depend. I'm not sure what they could really do. I'm like, if it were me and if it was my decision, I'd say, hey, maybe make some of the maps a little bit smaller and detail them a little bit more. But I already know that's probably off the table. So it's just, it is a little sad, but it's like, is the overworld content supposed to be the primary part of the game or not? I guess I would be kind of curious to hear what even the devs have to say about that, because I think they kind of just feel like it's just kind of there and something that players just throw away as they engage with the other parts of the game that I guess is where you're supposed to spend your time. So
yeah, that's a good point. Wow. So, you know, you now have, like I said, over 90,000 subs on YouTube, but back in 2020 you made a video when you got your first 100 subs. So I'm just curious, what is the secret to success?
The secret to success, getting the Asmongold shout out is the secret to success. That's really where the overwhelming majority of my following comes from. It's from that. Now, as far as before that, I did have pretty big success off of my infamous social hierarchy video that everybody probably knows. But even when that video popped off, that's when I went from like 100 subs to like 5,000 in a day, which is, astronomical. At that point, I was just like, what the hell's going on? I'm freaking flabbergasted. And so I'm like, oh, okay. But even from then onwards, it's like, it's not like my growth was really that explosive until Asmongold makes a video about that video, and then, the rest is history after that. But it's just all part of the YouTube stuff. I do think, I could talk about a lot of this stuff for a while, because I do obviously have some negative feeling towards algorithms and stuff on YouTube and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's like, once you find something like that, you can eventually realize what works for you. Because like in my case, I'm like, I have some pretty good ideas of stuff that I know will probably get viewership. And then, you just kind of have to feed the algorithm every now and again. It's like a little monster that hangs out in your basement that you have to go throw a sandwich to every once in a while, because, you have to keep it happy. Because, even if it's not necessarily something that I particularly want to make at that time, I'm like, well, I gotta go do this. And so I just like make sure to take care of it. But that's usually where I think a lot of even, other YouTubers will talk about trying to find this balance towards making stuff that you enjoy making, but also making stuff that is gonna be better for business. So
are you constantly looking at your analytics, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, or do you kind of just upload a video and kind of just leave it at that?
Well, I try to avoid my analytics page. I think that stuff's horrible for your mental health. It's like, if you wanna burn yourself out really fast, I think looking at that stuff is pretty rough. I mean, it's not great, because you'll just be like, okay, well, all this worked or whatever. But I'm like, it can kind of just take away from the core of making videos, or at least for me. I guess I should make sure I preface everything with saying this is how it works for me.
Sure.
Because a lot of people have different ways that they work through this stuff. But like, when I'm making these kinds of videos and whatnot, I don't usually start with an idea that I think is going to perform well in the algorithm. I just make whatever idea came to my head that I was doing, and I'm like, I add stuff to a script, and once a script gets to like a certain length, I usually just turn that into my next project because I'm like, well, I guess I have a lot to say about this, so I'll just make that next. But it can be like, I just do that, and then I post the video, and then I close my eyes, and then I pretend like it doesn't exist for a week, and then I'll come back to it later because I'm like, I don't want to look at it, it's like whatever. Sometimes I'm like, I usually hear this stuff like secondhand from somebody else who's paying way more attention to it than I am, because I can even think back to even when I have like the Asmongold shout out happening. As that's happening live, I'm just doing something completely unrelated because I'm like, just not paying any attention, and finally somebody gets through to me like, whoa, dude, this is happening, this is happening. I'm like, wait, what? Oh, okay. Great. But it's like I would just say it gets very exhausting if you just turn every single video that you make into a business transaction, because it very quickly will just become a job. So
interesting. Yeah. So what do you consider a successful video? Like, what is your metric?
Oh, geez. That's another complicated question. I'm like, I have a lot of weird stuff when it comes to video making. I usually put things together, and then if I can watch it through myself from start to finish without getting completely bored, I say, okay, it's probably good enough. But, that can always be kind of tricky, because I'm always like, well, my opinion is that. However I feel about the video, I usually tend to be my harshest critic on this stuff. So if I think it's just kind of okay, people usually think it's better than that. So I'm like, okay, that's usually where my metrics go. Now, of course, it's like, the problem with YouTube is that I'm like, technically I could just throw every single video onto my analytics page, and that can tell me what the most successful video is just based on some stats. But usually if I feel really good about the end of a video, that's when I consider it to be like a big success. So, every now and again I make something and I go, yeah, that was really good, I'm really happy with that. And that's usually the stuff I'm most proud of. And then, I just have to accept that I will not be able to be that excited 100% of the time with every video, because otherwise I will just be procrastinating something instead of releasing content, just chasing some perfectionist stuff. But, it kind of all comes and goes in cycles. I think it's like, the thing that resonated with me the most about video content was watching a Drew Gooden video a while ago.
Sure.
But he was talking about his stuff, like, I don't even remember, this is like an older video he made, but he was talking about YouTube, and he's like, yeah, sometimes I make a video that I do feel kind of okay about, and people are like, yeah, this isn't that great. He's like, but it helps motivate him to make something better after that, because you can kind of carry that momentum through. So I'm like, that's why, if I don't feel super great about a video, I just release it anyways and tell myself, okay, this is just gonna motivate me to do better next time. This is just the lull, the little drop in the roller coaster here, or whatever you want to call it. That's not super great, because I think sometimes it can just be really tough. I do feel like and like I said, if you're too much of a perfectionist about everything, you'll just end up never making anything ever.
Right.
Because odds are you'll probably never be 100% satisfied with everything that you make. It's just not realistic.
Yeah. Wow. So I want to talk a little bit about your MSQ videos, just because that was my introduction to your channel. And I do gotta say thank you for making these long videos, because so for me, for my day job, I drive around a lot. So whenever I have like a 1-2 hour commute going like to a work site, there was a time where I was just listening to your MSQ recaps, just back to back, just because while I love this game, I do think that the story is really, really long and it can be complicated at some time. So having these MSQ recap videos, they're just a godsend, because it allows me to make sure that I am understanding the story in a decent way, and that I like my takes on the game and how I see the game and how I see the story. It just makes me know that I am like what everybody else is saying about the game and how everybody else is interpreting it. So I do want to thank you for making these videos, because I listen to them a lot, just like on these like really long drives. But my question to you is, with a video like your Endwalker video was over 2 hours long, like how do you know when a video is done, when it's that long?
I really don't. You know, that project had a lot of craziness that goes into it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, I go back to it. I guess I can kind of, you know, I'll elaborate a little bit on this. I originally was gonna make my synopsis video around. It was probably back. I remember I started this. It was in like June or July. I was thinking about it, and I started writing up my script and doing stuff that I was for it, and then I just wasn't feeling very motivated. I was like, nah, I'm not really satisfied with this. So I threw it away or whatever, and I come back to it a lot later after that, where I finally started going to it. But I'm like, okay, I had a much better plan for it, because some of my other videos have had really shoddy planning, but I just knew Endwalker was going to be a very long video because I had a lot of stuff I wanted to say about it. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to make sure I have this all as organized as possible. I'm like, I have it all set up of like, I'm going to just record my entire playthrough on New Game Plus. I'm going to make sure that I'm doing my scripting at the same time. I'm going to have all my notes to myself for where all my clips are, so that I don't lose something and spend a bunch of time trying to find something specific that I want to use. And so it's like, honestly, if there's anything I did have to say I was really happy about with that video above all else, is that I was way more organized than I am for like many of my other projects, because it was like, sometimes I just end up getting stuck trying to find a stupid specific clip for way too long, and it was like, that just did not happen for my Endwalker video. I had it all organized ahead of time. I did all the correct prep work, and so it was relatively smooth. But even in the middle of that, I'm putting it together. I'm like, oh, you know, my Shadowbringer video is like an hour something long. Yeah. I'm like, my Endwalker video will probably be a similar length, I tell myself, and then I look at the timestamps. I'm like, I'm 50 minutes in. I'm an hour and 20 minutes into it. I'm like, I'm not even close to done. I'm like, next thing you know, I'm like, it's gonna be like over 2 hours, isn't it? And it was like, I hit a point where I was like, I could probably split this into 2 parts, but I don't really want to. I just want to make this one big video. And so I just kind of committed to it, and that was pretty much it. And it's like, it was a pretty weird time doing that. I was slaving away on that video for at least 10 or 11 hours a day. I was also around like the holiday time, so you know, my family's like wondering where the hell I am or what I'm doing. They're like, what? I'm like, don't worry. I'm like, I'm working on something. Okay, this is great. So, you know, I'm like, I only have like a couple of days off that I'm taking for like, you know, things I was obligated to do. And then I'm just going back to trying to finish this stupid thing, because I'm like, I'm motivated. I have the energy. I'm like, I'm going to just do this. And then that was pretty much it. So, you know, I was pretty happy with how all that turns out, but I don't have an exact plan for how long I want videos to be. Yeah. I don't like it when stuff ends up being super duper long. Usually I actually feel kind of annoyed with that, because I do a lot of editing for scripts. I make sure to go through. I'm always cutting out stuff a lot of the time. Like when I go back through, these scripts are shorter than whatever they were to start with. So right. You know, keep that in mind for this 2-hour Endwalker video. It was even longer before I changed things. Yeah. But it's like, you know, I'm always trying to like, okay, I want to try to make this more concise, because, you know, if I'm left out in the open, I'll just repeat myself a bunch of times saying the same thing, but just in a different way the second time. So I'm like trying to always edit this down as much as I can. And like, I have a general idea of how long the video is going to be based off of how long the script was, but I did not expect that video to be as long as it was. I don't even know how long the script actually was. It was some ungodly amount of words, and I was like, okay, whatever. But I just, in order to keep myself from going crazy, I just never looked at where the finish line was. I just kept focusing on whatever I needed to do in that moment. Because I was like, I will simply be overwhelmed at the amount of work left if I ever think about it. So I just pretended like it didn't exist.
Wow. Dang, that's so fascinating to me. Wow. So during your first playthrough of the MSQ, because I'm sure that in the back of your head, you know, you have that idea of, well, I'm gonna have to make a video on this. But are you constantly, you know, trying to take notes here and there, or are you just solely focus on the story, and then you'll get to the video when you get to the video?
I mean, my first playthrough of every MSQ is just very casual. I'm always just there to enjoy the game, because I feel like that's kind of the biggest thing is just, you know, playing the game and having fun like I'm supposed to with the game. I don't usually have too many ideas for it. Sometimes I'll, like, if I'm playing through the game and I have a vague idea of something, I might jot it down, but I'm not really specifically going out of my way to take notes on these playthroughs. There was, like, even as I was playing through Endwalker the first time, I wasn't really sure if I was even going to make a video on it, which I know it might sound a little crazy, but I was like, I don't know. I'm like, I'll see if I'm even really that motivated or not. I'm like, because I know people will probably expect it out of me, but I'm not sure if I'll even really want to. Yeah. But I ended up having a really good time with the story, and so I was like, okay, I'll probably do this eventually. But, you know, as I kind of said earlier, even when I was trying to start it up later in, like, you know, like I said, like mid-June or July of last year, I didn't really have the motivation during that time, and I was like, nope, I need to step away from the story a bit again, kind of let it digest, and then come back to it to do whatever I want to do to it. And of course, you know, these synopses videos are not a perfect representation of what the story is. It's always, you know, it's always my opinion on stuff. You can pretty clearly tell when I don't like something or when I really like something, and it's like, you know, I'm not trying to be some objectivist about everything in the plot line. I'm just like, no, I'm like, this is my own thing. I'm always making sure, like, I'll mention stuff that I like and whatnot. And, you know, I'm sure there's definitely parts of the story that some people really love that I absolutely skipped over because I didn't care, and I'm like, but that's okay, you know, this is what I'm going to do. If somebody wants to make a story video that includes all these things that they like, they can do it, but, you know, I'll just focus on what I want to do.
Yeah. When you were a smaller creator, how did you go about getting your videos out there? Like, were you posting them like on Reddit or anything like that? Like, how were you trying to grow? Yeah,
well, you know, at first I didn't really share my videos anywhere when I was first really making YouTube videos. I mean, we're talking way back at this point. I made some stuff because, I don't know, I just kind of I've always floated some video projects and stuff around, like, on the side as like a hobby every now and again. Not something I was ever super committed to. And I made some videos about, I want to say, like, Persona 5 or whatever. I was talking about how I liked the game, and I just kind of made it for myself. But I posted it on YouTube, and I shared it with my friends, and my friends were the ones who were like, no, dude, you got to put this out here. Like, you gotta show somebody else. Like, this is, like, definitely good enough for that kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And so I did share some of my stuff on Reddit, but nothing really, like, took off or anything special, especially when you're making videos for, you know, Persona 4 Golden before, I think, like, you know, the PC release just comes out or something. You're like, it's not always too exciting, and even the types of stuff that I want to make doesn't always resonate with that community. So it wasn't until, you know, I had stuff blow up on shitpost.xiv is where my videos took off.
That's my go-to too.
But it's like, you know, it's hard to, because you never know what's gonna take off over there either. So it was like, this was like a long time ago too, but it was like, I made, like, my mediocre scholar guide, posted on there, you know, small amount of attention. A lot of the other stuff, small amount of attention. And then eventually, you know, I have a video blow up, and I was like, oh my god, I'm on the front page of this shitpost subreddit, finally. That's where I belong, I guess. But it's always just kind of funny to think about that. I guess the best part about it was that even when I was really small and making these, like, class guides and stuff back then, it was really funny that by posting on Reddit, I had accrued people who would put dislikes on every single one of my videos, and I was like, that's how I know I've done it. I've become a real creator, because I have people who actively dislike my stuff.
Who fucking hate you.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my god. I'm like, I never thought I'd reach this point, you know? I thought I would always be small enough where the only people who would stick around were people who like me, but no, my content's being recommended to people who don't like it. That's how I know it's happening. That's crazy.
Yeah. So where exactly do you like how do you see your channel? Like do you eventually want to make it into like a brand? Like is this something you want to do full time, or are you kind of okay with it just being like a little side hobby thing that you just have on the side?
Well, I do effectively do this full time right now. Now we can I don't think about it too much, because if I claim that I do this full time, I'm gonna start thinking about it like a job. So let me just pretend like it's not.
Fair.
I do spend like the most of my day working on this stuff, and I don't work another job at the moment. So this is just what I do. But as far as like branding and stuff, I don't know. I don't think about these things too much. I just try to focus on making videos first, and everything else is kind of secondary to that. So it's like, this is how you end up where I am now, where I'm like, well, I make stuff and that's about it. I'm like, that's my channel motto. It says it on there, right? I make the videos, some people like them. That's pretty much it. That's just what I do.
Yeah. And I know you've dipped your toes into streaming on Twitch. And I'm kind of curious as to how do you see Twitch differing from making videos on YouTube?
Well, at this point, it's pretty obvious that what I do on YouTube is very scripted. I have a lot of planning that goes into it. I get to record my audio takes as many times as I want, so thankfully I can cut out most of the times when I slur my speech together or randomly have something stupid happen or just say a word incorrectly. So live streaming is obviously very different because it's just all live, and that can be kind of complicated for me because, a lot of times I don't even have things planned out ahead of time because I'm like, do I even have a topic that I really even necessarily want to talk about? I'm like, I guess I can just talk about the pretty colors that I see on the screen. And so it's like, that's kind of it. But I think it's kind of weird for me. I find myself to be in the a weird age bracket where I was on the internet really before live streaming took off, and so a lot of the internet content that I idolize is just very separate from live streams, and so I don't watch too many streams to begin with, which I think is usually the kind of the core for being able to do that kind of content, is watching a lot of it first and kind of picking up on the things that you like. And so I just don't feel like I have that kind of experience when it comes to live streaming. I'll still do it for fun, just if I have something that I know that I want to do, or at this point I only stream all my ultimate prog and nothing else. But but even that kind of stuff doesn't, like, it's not really nice for me to do only prog streams because it kind of defeats the purpose of the live stream sometimes. I like to be able to interact with my chat and actually like say things, but I can't do that when I'm in the middle of an ultimate raid and I need to focus. Right. So it's like, most of my live streams I think were more fun when would it be like when I was just playing like Pokemon or something, or like a really long time ago when I streamed Return of the Obra Dinn, where everybody's losing their mind at me not being able to spot the really obvious way to solve all the puzzles in the game. And you're like, that's kind of fun though, it's like people really enjoy that because it's like, oh my god, how do you miss this really obvious thing? And I'm like, I'm just that good. And then I find some random like crazy thing that is like super obscure that I notice, and I can figure out that, and they're like, what's wrong with this guy? And you're like, okay, at least it's like a conversation that you can have and kind of keep it rolling. But it's just, streaming is just kind of its own thing. I never really wanted to be a streamer primarily anyways, so I'm kind of okay with that being just a side thing that I do every now and again.
I've noticed that a lot of your more recent videos are not Final Fantasy based, and I'm just curious as to how you see this entire conversation, because I've talked to a lot of other creators who tell me that it's really tough for them to make non-14 content because it just doesn't get the same amount of views as their actual 14 content. And some of them are saying that they feel boxed in and they feel that they are forced to make 14 content. And I'm just curious as to how do you see that? Do you Do you?
Oh, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. Of course, it's like, it is very frustrating on YouTube because, and I guess the thing is that a lot of people, we don't even necessarily know how it works. But it's like, I mean, you can even look at me, you know, if I'm making something not 14 related, it's like, how many views is it gonna get? You're like, not a whole lot, really.
Yeah.
But it's like, you start to wonder, like, why does this happen or whatever. It's like, I have no idea. But my guess is that there's plenty of things that obviously kind of feed into this. When I make a video that's related to Final Fantasy XIV, well, what happens is that my backlog of all the other content that I've made now gets recommended more on YouTube, and since it's all neatly categorized into the nice 14 box, it can just recommend all those videos to the same people who watched my other 14 stuff.
Right.
And it's like pretty easy for it. When I make stuff outside of it, I don't get that kind of back feed that you get from all this prior content that I've made. It doesn't even recommend other videos outside of 14. It just won't recommend anything to people. And so it is very frustrating because you're like, surely there's at least somebody out here who wants to watch this stuff, but you know, it just simply doesn't get recommended to people. And you're like, oh, I don't really know.
Yeah.
So it's like, these days my solution is pretty straightforward. I'm like, I make 14 videos every now and again because, like I said, that's me feeding the algorithm, the monster in the basement, and then I make my other stuff on the side, and I just kind of have that building up so that maybe one day YouTube will finally start recommending that backlog to people. I'm like, I could just be coping on that, but you know, I just accept that some of that stuff is just not going to be super great. I do think, though, it's like, you know, for everybody else who feels boxed in on this, I'm 100% there with you because I feel completely boxed into just making 14 videos all the time. You know, if I was like making smart business decisions, I would only be making 14 videos at this point, because, you know, based on the analytics that I do look at, that would be how I could finally push to the 100K that I set as a goal like 2 years ago. Don't look at that. And, you know, it's like, it is kind of sad that I know that would just work that well, but it's also just weird how YouTube works anyways, because it's like the raw number of impressions that those videos are given is just insane compared to anything else. And of course, you know, YouTube will be like, oh, you got to improve your watch time and click-through rates. And I sit here on the side and I say, but my videos have higher watch times and higher click-through rates on non-14 content, so why don't you recommend it to anybody? And it's like, it's just a big guessing game, and it's not really fun to really try to deal with that. So I'm just like, okay. I just go back to myself, say the same thing. I'm like, at my core, I just want to make videos that I'm happy with, and as long as I can meet that threshold, maybe this stuff will work out more later. Yeah. But, you know, it's just, I'm not sure exactly what it is. I'm like, I think it's like partially YouTube. I don't know how many people would really fall into the category, because I'm like, how many truly viewers would say they only watch Final Fantasy XIV content? I'm like, I can't possibly be that high.
Right?
It's like, yeah. but like I said, you can't be 100% sure on it. But it's like, I'm not sure, because I always try to think, I'm like, are there other 14 creators though who've ever managed to break out of the bubble? I'm like, it's been pretty tough, because I'm like, I can't think of too many off the top of my head.
Maybe Lucy Pyre?
Lucy Pyre's one, for sure.
Yeah, but other than that,
no. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, so a lot of us feel like we're trapped here. So, you know, basically, I'm just like everyone else in that regard. It's like, I'm not special on that.
Yeah.
It's like, if I find out the secret, I'll let everyone know. Yeah, odds are I probably won't figure out the secret.
Just make sure to DM me first.
Yeah. I'm like, if it does happen, it'll be because of something that I have no idea, because I feel like that's how YouTube works for everybody who gets really successful. Once something works, they have no idea why even. They just know that all these specific set of circumstances, that's what caused it to work. Yeah. Now I'm just going to try to recreate this like it's part of a ritual, and you don't even know what part of the ritual was the thing that made it work in the first place.
Yeah. Well, you know, with that, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking with me for an hour. You are awesome. You do awesome work. And what do you have planned in the future? Are there any projects you want to plug? Anything coming up that people should know about?
Oh, I don't like plugging too many of my projects just because I have a nice little workflow here of writing down video ideas, and then I add things to the scripts, and then once it hits a certain threshold, that's what I roll with. But that can change at a moment's notice, so I don't like to set people's expectations anywhere.
No
I will say, you can probably expect a few more 14 videos out of me within the next couple of months or so while I make some other stuff on the side, because I've been away from 14 for a good little bit here. So I'll be making some stuff coming back to that, but otherwise, nothing too specific.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you to the chat for being here with us. Make sure you go and subscribe to Misshapen Chair on YouTube and follow him on Twitter. I know you don't like Twitter. I don't like Twitter either, but apparently everybody needs a Twitter nowadays.
It's how is it pronounced now? Zwitter? I don't know what the heck it's called anymore. But yeah, that thing.
But yeah, so thank you again, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.